I've talked about our Now Spinning group on Facebook plenty of times before. It is a great community of record collectors. And one of the cool things we do on a monthly basis is the admin team gets together and presents a show called High Rotation, where we give recommendations on albums that we're listening to and stuff that we're really into at that time. This is the inaugural episode. Check it out after the break. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen of the Now Spinning group. My name is G.I. Sanders. If you don't know, I am the founder of the group. I am doing a little multitasking here, making sure that the link is populated in all places, and it looks like it's working. I see some people logging on. So this is the inaugural, the premiere, the global premiere of what is now known as High Rotation, which is a very impromptu and in many ways experimental idea where we hope to bring you some insights on what we're listening to. And when I say we, that's the most important part here. And the coolest part for me is it's not just myself. So I founded the Now Spinning group, but it doesn't work without the community. And it certainly does not work without our admin team and the folks that are going to be on this stream. So we have Rex, who's going to join us here just momentarily, Rex Burks, and he is obviously the Jedi of the daily challenge, which you know and love here in the Now Spinning group. Good friend and a great person, and very happy that he's involved in all of this because it doesn't work without Rex for sure, as you all know. Also joining us is going to be Ezra Boggs, who another great friend who's on the admin team here on the Now Spinning group and has become a dear friend as well, and who is very knowledgeable not only about vinyl and but also just music in general, variety of genres. So both of these guys are key to the group, and I'm very excited to have them join me. Welcome, fellas. How are you?
Great. Good evening.
So when I came up with this idea, just to give everyone a little bit of context before we really dive in, the idea just came about because we do the daily challenge and we do post in the Now Spinning group about what we're listening to. But like everything on social media, it's there and it's gone so fast. So I thought this would be a cool way to do a monthly roundtable to where we can focus. And now my dog's barking, of course. I don't know if you can hear that. Where we do a roundtable where we can dive a little deeper versus just a photo or a couple photos. So that was the initial idea. So I think this will become a place where Now Spinning members can tune in if they want to get recommendations on not only, new or old music that they've never heard, but maybe specific pressings, and they can get real world recommendations, feedback, anecdotes about the music we love. So that was kind of the initial idea. How are you guys seeing this? Ezra, when we came up with this idea, is your head kind of in the same place?
It really was. I think one of the massive benefits of the forum is discovering and being introduced to things that traditionally you would find out in a record store.
Sure.
One of the first things I do if I go into a store is look for the staff picks. If someone's working there 8 hours a day, what are they listening to? What are they recommending? And I think the forum has provided some amazing resources and discoveries.
Absolutely. And you, Rex, what are your thoughts here on High Rotation and where we take it?
When I look at my collection, and I'll just stop at any shelf in any of the rooms and look through what's sitting there, so many times it brings me back to there was a summer I was really into this artist or really into this genre, and those are the sort of stories I tell when someone's in my home. Hey, you got to hear this, and we're going to do some of that tonight because this is what I'm into at the moment. And so a way to share that and memorialize that. We all tend to be a little bit streaky in what we're listening to, and so to share some of those streaks that we're on at the moment, and then see how that changes over time, I think is a fun thing. And also, I don't know if it was mentioned already, but the comment section is open, so we'd love to hear from the listeners and the audience as well, in terms of feedback or comments or questions that they have, or even suggestions on how we can improve this.
100%. Yeah, this is all a work in progress, y'all. Like I said, very much an experiment. Jared McDowell, who's on the admin team as well and works very close with me at not only NTX Vinyl, but also our label, the DFW Legacy Series. He was going to be here and couldn't make it, unfortunately. So he'll be on the stream, hopefully next time. And this will be, I'm seeing it as a very fluid thing, whereas like, if I can't make it, hey, you guys, take the reins and do it. Or, hey, maybe we'll get to a point where we can pull in guests from the group. Other people who we know would be have some valuable opinions on and some cool stuff that they're listening to right now. So we're making it up as we go to a certain extent, but I think in the end this is going to be a cool, just a cool live forum once a month. Like I said, where people can tune in and kind of hear at least what a couple of us are listening to, and hopefully that'll inspire some others. So the idea here is to go roundtable. So Ezra, you're up first, man. What have you been listening to lately? What's your first pick of the night?
In alphabetical order.
Of course.
Jimmy Cliff.
Okay.
Rebirth.
Okay.
So produced by Tim Armstrong of Operation Ivy and Rancid.
Really?
And the rhythm section is from the Agrolites. I cannot recommend this highly enough.
When was this recorded? What year? Like, what era is this from?
This was recorded 2012.
Okay, so it's somewhat modern as far as the
somewhat modern. Does a cover of Guns of Brixton that is just phenomenal. Does a cover of Ruby Soho, but it's having Tim Armstrong and really modern, aggressive ska and reggae players behind him that really, he shines on this. Phenomenal record.
It's
great.
If you don't mind me asking, Jimmy Cliff, what genre / era is he most known for versus this?
Oh, goodness.
Like, he dates back
70s reggae.
He's Jamaican. So
yeah,
okay.
This is one of those kids that he inspired, got together to record with him.
That's cool.
And if you can find it, get it.
Right on.
It's well worth the hunt.
Awesome.
So
I've never heard it before, and that's something I'll definitely need to check out. I like it.
And I actually just Googled it because I wasn't sure, but Jimmy's still alive. He's 78 now.
Is he really?
Yep.
Wow. So he was, early 60s, mid 60s when he recorded it with those guys. That's very, very interesting. That's got to be a cool collaboration for sure, especially for those cats.
Yeah.
That's
awesome.
Great.
I dig that. I did not expect us to kick off with a reggae record. That's pretty damn cool. All right, Rex, what do you got?
Take us to the next one?
You want me to go? Okay,
yeah.
I'll go. So a lot of, not all of, but there's a good portion of my listening habits that center around shows, because when I buy tickets to a show, then I'm like, oh man, I need to get in that mode. And sometimes the show's months down the line, so it takes a while, and other times, maybe coming right up. Now, this is one I'm actually not going to be in attendance, but it got me thinking of, because they are coming to Dallas. And this is, this is Les Claypool's Frog Brigade, the Fearless Flying Frog Brigade. And what this is, first of all, I have to show the record because it's absolutely gorgeous. So this is like, come on, this is like a green splattery on it's hard to even catch it on the camera. And the cool part about this record, obviously Les Claypool being from Primus, and I'm not familiar with a number of the musicians on this, but what I am familiar with is the music, because not only is this a triple LP, with the double gatefold action. So it's beautiful as far as the artwork and everything. But as you can see, one of the allures there is they cover the entire Pink Floyd Animals on one of this, and they also cover "Shine On You Crazy Diamond." They do a King Crimson cover. So for me, because I'm not a huge Primus fan, like I've got the main records, so I've got 3 or 4 Primus records. But when I saw that Les Claypool was behind covering Animals by Pink Floyd, I was like, I kind of have to hear what that sounds like, and it's pretty damn cool. And tying it back to the beginning, they are coming to the Dallas area, but unfortunately I'm out of town, so I'm not going to be able to do it. But I don't think they've toured very much. This is from this is a live set recorded October 8th, 2000. So this dates back 20 plus years. And apparently I was reading up when they just announced that they were touring again. And he basically said that he gets so many requests to tour because he's got all kinds of side projects and does all kinds of stuff. But he said this was the one project that he continually hears about from Primus fans going, when are you going to do the Frog Brigade tour again? So I'm totally bummed to miss it, but I have the LP. So that's why it's been high rotation, because I hadn't listened to it in quite a while. And then I saw that show date announced and it made me pull it out. And so now it's been kind of sitting over in my stack that I've had running for a couple of weeks now. So that's my first pick. First pick is the Les Claypool's Frog Brigade.
Very cool.
There you go. And I'm pretty sure you can stream this and that type of thing as well. I'm not positive, but I think it's pretty accessible too. If you want it on vinyl, I don't think it's out of print or any of that. They recently did a reissue, so it is one that you can actually grab. That's one of the things I was curious what was going to happen here if we were all going to show records that no one can buy because they're just so hard to find. I tried to pick a few that were more accessible.
Yeah.
Or at least I was kind of thinking that way, because that would really suck to watch this. And we show 25 different records and they're all out of print, cost hundreds of dollars. Like that would be no fun. So I was trying to keep that in mind with a few of my picks, this being one of them. So there you go. That's my first pick on high rotation.
So while we're on the subject of Les Claypool briefly, I'll tell you a little story. So there was a concert a couple of years ago at House of Blues. I know some of you were there, where it was with Les Claypool and Sean Lennon when they were touring their new album.
That's one of his other very active side projects.
And I paid for one of the little meet and greet things they had before the show, and they had a Q&A with Sean and Les, and we got a photo op and some autographs and stuff, and that was great. But one of the things going on is that while they were doing the Q&A, they were serving us wine from Les's vineyard. Like he had, so this is a man of many talents, and he's got his own vineyard, right? And so I saw him just throwing the bottles away, and I was like, I want one of those bottles. So this is Claypool Cellars Pachyderm Pinot Noir 2013. So I saved the bottle for my collection. Of course, it's empty now. They were serving the wine, but that's my Les Claypool wine bottle.
I have a follow-up story. Hold on.
Oh, here we go.
Speaking of wine bottles, and speaking of prog rockers or whatever you want to call them that sell wine, I think most people know that Maynard from Tool has his own vineyard as well. This is a bottle, and it's actually signed by him, but it's not very exciting because it's the lamest signature ever. There's Maynard James Keenan's ridiculous signature. And so the story here is that I actually didn't get this personally. He was doing a signing, I guess, like a book signing, but it was for wine. It was at a winery or something here in town. And my buddies waited in line for a long time, and they got me one. And then they said, it's a good thing you didn't wait in line because it was a cattle call and you couldn't even get close to him and talk to him or anything. It was just like he literally just scribbled his things. You went along. So anyways, that's my empty bottle of wine in the listening room.
As most of you know, I've been avidly collecting autographs for a long time, and the bottle as a canvas for an autograph is not a great canvas for an autograph anyway. But I always like, if they're going to sign it, I'd rather them sign the paper label than that Sharpie on glass thing. That doesn't work very well.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, so I guess it's my turn with my first pick. So I want to know, did you guys see the Elvis movie last year? That was the Baz Luhrmann Elvis movie. Okay, so I loved this movie. I loved that's glaring. I'm sorry because the shrink is still on it.
That's all right.
I loved the film and I loved the soundtrack. I thought it was just fantastic. And if any of the listeners today haven't seen the movie, please check it out. It was extremely well done. I heard from, obviously Lisa Marie passed away recently, but Priscilla and Lisa Marie both said, this is the Elvis movie that we've always Wanted, that really sort of captures the story. And Austin Butler plays Elvis, and it's amazing. But the soundtrack, I think, is really a standalone piece of art itself. And the thing I love about it is that they incorporate music that sounds like the 50s and 60s and even some of Elvis himself, but they also weren't afraid to bring in sort of newer hip hop sounds and whatnot. And so, like, on the soundtrack, you've got Doja Cat, you've got CeeLo Green, Eminem, Chris Isaac, Stevie Nicks. There's a really cool recording with Casey Musgraves. And so I would say check out
eclectic.
The soundtrack for sure.
Well, and I think, thinking back to the movie, I've only seen it once, and it was a few months back. But that makes sense because the movie, the way it was shot, it very much used, for lack of a better term, like modern cinematography style.
Right.
And that really caught me off guard. In the early stages of the movie, I was like, what's going on here? Because I thought this was going to be an Elvis documentary, and you're expecting to you knew it wasn't a documentary, but
right.
Still, it was a very modern way to tell that story, which I understand why they did it. It just took me a little while to like settle into it. Mm-hmm. But the story, I 100% agree with. And by the end of it, I was like, this is fantastic.
And it's very much, it's an Elvis movie, but it's very much a Baz Luhrmann movie too. And if you're familiar, like with Moulin Rouge, that's just his style. It's that's
what I heard.
Very artsy, take you through a time tunnel. I just thought really, really well done. There's a couple of interesting things people might not know about that film. It looks so much like old Memphis, the Sun Studios, the Graceland, the Beale Street, but 100% of that was recreated on a big field in Australia. Like, they built all of that in Australia. So none of it was actually shot in Memphis at all, which is interesting. There's one scene which Elvis fans might find raise an eyebrow at, and that's the one where Elvis is calling out Parker from the stage. Like, he blows up a show to call out Parker in front of the audience. That never happened. And anyone who knows Elvis knows that would have never happened, because Elvis, the one thing he always cared about was the stage show. Like, it had to be perfect. And he would agonize for hours after a stage show on any little thing that could have been improved. So for him to blow up a show to call out his manager, certainly Parker and Elvis fought like cats and dogs in the 70s, but it never got into the stage show. So that was just something that the filmmakers, did, that I thought was the one thing that that's not true to Elvis at all. So
that's interesting. I'm going to need to give that another watch, just because, like most films, second and third time's usually way better.
Yeah. So and the casting is just amazing. The casting on Elvis and on Parker with Tom Hanks and on Priscilla Presley, all of the casting is just phenomenal.
I will say that I talked to several people after watching that, and it was kind of a split. Several people told me they didn't like it because it kind of told the real story, and it was so damn sad about how, man, he could have gone on and would maybe, have had so much more of a career and a meaningful career, but he just got driven into the ground.
Think about the timeline here. His entire career was less than 20 years when you take out the Army time. And in 20 years, he made 33 motion pictures. He made over 70 albums. He did over 1,000 concerts. It was just, it was a breakneck pace. The man never took a break. And he was using prescriptions to prop himself up that just ultimately destroyed his heart. But if he could have just slowed down, think of the way artists work now. Now you put out an album, you do a tour, and then you take a year off. You put out an album, do a tour, take a year off. If Elvis had worked at that pace, he may have lived to be 80 years old. But, back then it was just so different. And there's an ironic thing here about money too with the Elvis story is that, yes, Parker was bad with money, but Elvis was also bad with money. They had different vices. Elvis was giving it away and spending it like water, and Parker was gambling it. And, neither one of them were good with money. And his dad, Vernon, was supposedly the business manager. He was bad with money. When Elvis died and Lisa Marie inherited the whole estate, it was Priscilla that took over as the manager, and she turned it from almost worthless into, $100 million fortune in a few years. So it turns out Priscilla was the one that was good with money. They should have turned it all over to her much earlier. And, there might have been, Elvis might not have been, penniless or whatever it was, but.
Yeah. Cool. All right. You're up next, Ezra. Let's keep it going. What we got here? Can't see it.
Let me get over here. Sorry. Dismemberment Plan.
Dismemberment Plan. Okay.
Album called Change. This is probably one of the most humiliating moments I ever experienced on stage. We made the mistake of opening for them in Austin at Emo's, and they looked like business accountants. But then they got on stage and they just killed. It is, people will call it alternative experimental. There is no genre for it.
That's my first question is, what does it compare to? Because I know the name, but I've never heard the band.
Imagine nerds doing Mars Volta.
Okay. So it's going to take some effort.
That is the Dismemberment Plan. It is, I mean, phenomenal musicianship, but they will sing about the dorkiest stuff imaginable in time signatures that most humans can't do.
Very, very interesting. And is that one that you picked up recently or something like that?
Yeah, I think this was an RSD last year.
Okay.
But anytime I come across one in my collection, I'm guaranteed a week, 2 weeks, I'm going to listen to it because it's stuff that you really, really can dig into.
Very cool. I like it. I've, like I said, I've heard the name plenty, but I couldn't have told you necessarily genre. Are they still an active band to this day too?
I believe they are. I know they put out a record a few years back, but I haven't seen anything as far as them performing or touring. Gotcha. I mean, the name is an obvious misnomer. I mean, we showed up thinking they were a death metal band, and no.
Not the case.
Really nice guys, very pleasant.
Well, that's super cool. You got to be introduced to them by sharing the stage with them, obviously.
What's that?
I said it's super cool that you were introduced to them by getting to open for them,
yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it's always a humiliating thing when you're standing buying their T-shirts at the end of the night, just kind of denying that you actually played before. We did that, and that happened once we played with Morphine also.
Oh, wow.
The same thing. Really great guys, though. So.
Very cool.
But yes, cool. Dismemberment Plan, that one was Change. Anything by them is just great.
Awesome. All right, I'm up next. This is one that I pulled out. Actually, I didn't pull it out. My son pulled it out, and it was random, and he pulled it out just a week or so ago, a week and a half or so ago, and it stayed out. This is Fire on the Bayou by the Meters.
Oh, man.
Absolutely love the Meters. When it comes to, funk, R&B, soul, this is my go-to. The New Orleans style is just so good. And this is actually a Vinyl Me Please reissue, which I think is still readily available. So this is on pretty colored wax as well. Really nice pressing because the Meters stuff is really hard to come by. Original stuff. You just don't see it. I'm always curious if I went for record digs in New Orleans or more in the Southeast, if I would see more of it, because I can count on one finger on one hand, the number of times I've seen a Meters record out in the wild while kind of digging. It just doesn't happen very much. So that's, I don't have an original of this one. I do have a couple originals that I picked up over the years, but this is one I've never come across. So when Vinyl Me Please announced this one, I was all over it. So this features the title track, and it finishes off with the Mardi Gras Mambo. So it's full on New Orleans, and I've got family coming from that era as far as Baton Rouge and New Orleans is concerned. So the Meters is one that I listen to often, and I was excited when my son pulled it out because every now and then, not that often, I'll let one of the kids pick out a record because I'm pretty specific. But I said, you want to pick one out? All right, go ahead. And then he went over and he brought the Meter stuff. And I'm like, damn, that's a good call. So it's stayed by the turntable since then. There you go.
Very cool.
Rex, what do you got?
There's a funny comment in the chat. It says, I thought Rex just created challenges. I didn't know he actually played records. So
I know, right?
I assure you, I do play records every single day.
I would hope so. Look at the room you're sitting in.
Okay, so GI mentioned something earlier in the call about when a concert is coming up, you tend to revisit that artist and dig into that artist. And I am deep into that experience at the moment. A few months back, Peter Gabriel announced his tour, and he is coming to Dallas. He's going to be at American Airlines Center, I think in October. And we've got tickets to that show. I'm sure some of the rest of you do as well. But that has prompted me to go back and dive into the Peter Gabriel catalog, but also the Genesis larger catalog. I have never before seen any version of Genesis, group or solo, so I'm very excited about this. Peter's probably my favorite. But this deep dive into the Genesis catalog has been very rewarding.
That's a big dive because that's a big catalog.
You know, I made a list of the Genesis albums, studio and live, and then the 6 principal members. So you've got Peter Gabriel, Phil Collins, Ray Wilson, Mike Rutherford, Tony Banks, and Steve Hackett. And all 6 of those guys, in addition to their work on Genesis albums, they all have very deep solo catalogs. And so it is well over 100 albums, just live and studio albums from those 6 plus the Genesis catalog. You're probably at, 120, 130 albums just across those 6 guys, group and solo, not even counting compilations and things, just the original material. And so, anyway, I've been doing a deep dive, and of course Peter Gabriel specifically is on the first 7 Genesis albums.
That was my first question.
And some of them I have on vinyl, and those are really great, and they're very, very different from some of us that were kids in the '80s knew more of the Phil Collins era. The earlier stuff, the first 7 albums with Peter are, I would say, anyone who's a Pink Floyd fan, dive into that early Genesis stuff. It's reminiscent in some ways, and it's not like they're trying to mimic Pink Floyd, but it's that late '60s, early '70s full-on experimental thing that Pink Floyd was doing, and I think it's a nice compliment to that catalog. And then Peter Gabriel's solo catalog is so diverse and so rewarding. A couple of the albums that I hadn't even known about before or had never paid any attention to are the soundtracks. He did like 3 or 4 soundtrack albums. One of them, this one is called Passion. There was this movie where it's like Jesus is horny for Mary Magdalene, Last Temptation of Christ, but the sound, I never saw the movie, but the soundtrack is amazing. It's like all these Middle Eastern artists and mostly instrumental, but super, super good.
I see that one on vinyl every now and then. I've had a couple copies of that. It's pretty collectible. I mean, it's not impossible to find. But
another fun thing, Peter's solo catalog, the first 4 albums are self-titled. So he's got 4 in a row that are just titled Peter Gabriel, which is a little bit confusing, but that's fun. And then the real surprise for me, there's a Genesis album called Calling All Stations where Ray Wilson sings lead. It's the only one where he was lead. And so that prompted me to go dig into Ray Wilson. And he's Scottish, and he still lives in Europe and tours Europe a lot. But his albums are just fantastic. And this is one of his more recent ones called The Weight of a Man, that was released in this sort of hardback format. I don't know if there's a vinyl on this one or not. I found CDs on most of his stuff. But check out Ray Wilson because, again, very, very Genesis-like, but in some other directions. So,
and what role did he play in Genesis?
He was the lead singer on that one album, Calling All Stations, because Peter was out and Phil was out, and they got Ray to sing lead. But he's got 12 or 15 solo albums that are really, really good. And of course, Peter's catalog and Phil's catalog. People are probably most familiar with Phil. But the one thing, so Mike Rutherford did a few albums as Mike Rutherford, but mostly he performed as Mike and the Mechanics. And the Mike and the Mechanics stuff, I'm having a harder time warming up to. I love the hits like Silent Running and Living Years. Like he had great radio hits that I remember as a kid, but deeper in the catalog, I haven't found it as rewarding as certainly with Peter and Ray and Phil.
That album's like is that album like mid 80s ish or?
Yeah. So I think the first Mike Rutherford solo album is mid 70s, and then it was early to mid 80s that they had their hits as Mike and the Mechanics.
That's what I was thinking of. Yeah.
Okay. But he's not the singer. So he's got like Paul Carrick singing lead on some of these. Paul Young. So
Interesting.
So anyway, yeah. So the deep dive into Genesis has been very rewarding, and I recommend that. Especially check out the deeper Peter Gabriel and Ray Wilson cuts for sure.
Awesome, love it. Ezra, what you got?
I didn't pick nothing. I was tempted just to do jazz records, but I thought no, that's what jazz is going to expect, and a lot of Electric Miles Davis. This is GoGo Penguin. It's a trio on Blue Note. They play acoustic upright, obviously acoustic drums. Piano player also does a lot with keyboards, but they are also classified as techno because the patterns they play are not straight or traditional jazz. The recording quality on GoGo Penguin albums are the kind of things I would say test your hi-fi system with.
Mm-hmm.
They're recorded that well. Cannot recommend them highly enough.
Is that the one to start with there, the album you're holding?
Yeah, this is a really great one.
What's that one called?
This is Man-Made Object.
Man-Made Object. Okay, so electronic infused jazz of some sort.
It's acoustic jazz with some keyboard, but when you listen to what the acoustic bassist is doing and drummer, it's almost straight drum and bass at times, and just recorded unbelievably well.
That's interesting. So I know, like you said, that you didn't choose all jazz because that would be too obvious to me because I know you're a big jazz aficionado. So my question for you, Ezra, is when you go to spin a record, do you choose a jazz record like 50% of the time or is it like 90% of the time?
Honestly, I throughout the day will listen to
just
several different genres. I mean, I'll go from the Jesus Lizard to Death Grips to Thelonious Monk to it's
so no rhyme or reason. Most times.
What's your favorite music? I'll say music that's really innovative. Music that provokes me to think, that provokes me to understand what's going on.
I'm pretty similar. Most of the times I'll bounce around. Every now and then I'll get, if I pick out a certain record, what happens to me, and I'd be curious if this happens to other people, when you go back and you put it on the shelf, like if I'm listening to Pink Floyd, and I go back to put it on a shelf, and I'm like, ooh, I'd like to listen to that one too. It's because I'm right there. I end up choosing another Pink Floyd, So I'll get stuck in a pattern sometimes like that. Or maybe by genre, I'll go, if I'm listening to a country record, I'm going to put that country record back, I might spot another one. So I end up going a handful in a row. But by and large, most times I'm standing there kind of just sporadically picking, regardless of,
To Rex's point, I'll fixate or get stuck on an artist. I've got a Gordon Lightfoot later. I've probably listened to his whole discography since he passed. Some of what you were just saying about Genesis, that's foundational prog rock. The stuff that Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, you listen to that and you can tag virtually everyone being inspired by that music. So a lot of it, I'll do the exact same thing. If I'm listening to someone, I want to hear how they progressed as well.
That's a cool thing too, obviously. Influences and connections of other band members, things like that. So Awesome, man. Awesome. I'm up, right?
You are.
Speaking of kind of mini deep dives, I'm kind of in the middle of deep diving here with Iggy Pop and the Stooges.
Nice.
This is called, it's the best of. It's called Nude and Rude, a UK pressing. This is one that is actually hard to find. I don't know if it's necessarily valuable, but it's certainly, I don't think it's ever had a US pressing. It still has the UK import price on it there, $34.98 or whatever. But the Stooges and certainly Iggy's solo work is stuff that I've always known of. I've never really done that deep dive until recent years. I've started to educate myself and have gotten to a point where really, really enjoy, of course, the early stuff. But now I'm starting to get into even Iggy's solo catalog, which is what's great for this one, because this has stuff from I Want to Be Your Dog all the way through Lust for Life, and just like all the way up through. This was released in 96, I think. Yeah, this is at 96. So it goes up to that level. But yeah, just kind of to your point about Genesis and the deep dive, like it's one of those artists I've always heard of. I've always known is iconic. I always have known that they influenced so many others, but I've never taken the time. And that's honestly for me one of the best parts about vinyl as a format, because it's my format of choice. Is when I run across a record like this, I would have never gone and like streamed this or streamed Iggy's Essentials, whatever. So much of the music that I've been exposed to in the last few years since starting NTX and now spinning has been because it's run across my hands on vinyl. And I'm like, well, I'm sitting here and I'm holding it. I might as well check it out. You know, I would have never seeked it out on YouTube or streaming or whatever. But since it's run across, and that's really what happened with the Stooges is, you know, a couple of those early ones came across and I was like, I got to just listen to these. I know the covers are so iconic and I know like the one or two big songs. But so for me, this is a good one just because it's the best of. But again, I don't know if this one's easy to find. I don't think it was ever pressed in the U.S. But yeah, I'm in the midst of many months of a little mini dive, maybe not a deep dive, a medium dive on Iggy. But I suspect it'll continue for a while because it's good stuff. A lot of it too is when I'll find a good documentary or something, and if I learn the history and the timeline, then I can visualize. Okay, I need to get this one because this is the record where it all goes to shit, or this is the record where they made their move or whatever. And so I end up aligning a lot of my listening habits along with, again, education and knowledge of the artist. And that's how I learned to appreciate him a lot more. So yeah, that's my next pick. Iggy, best stuff. There you go.
All right, I guess I'm up. So that was actually a perfect segue for what I wanted to say next about if you learn something about it, it's so much more enjoyable if there's a book or a documentary. And so I know that there are a lot of our members who are at least casual jazz fans. And if you think about what most people think of as classic jazz, it starts in the 50s, and it's the Miles Davis and the Dave Brubeck and the John Coltrane. And those were mostly trios, quartets, and quintets. So we think of a small jazz combo as sort of the golden age of jazz. But and I love all that stuff too. But if you go back even a few years into the 40s, jazz was big bands. Like they were doing, 20 and 25 piece bands, and it was music for dancing. And so I've got a couple of artists that I'd like to, at least get you to put your foot in the water a little bit and try some of this. I read this book about Tommy Dorsey, and Tommy Dorsey was one of these artists who was touring one of these big bands all over the country in the 30s and 40s. And this book by, Peter Levinson. Peter Levinson's passed away now, but he wrote this phenomenal book about the life of Dorsey, and it really takes you in that space, like G.I. was talking about, in the 40s. So it's before television, and a huge part of pop culture was dancing. And these bands, Glenn Miller and Tommy Dorsey and Jimmy Dorsey and Benny Goodman and Artie Shaw, Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong, they had these big bands that would just tour the country, and all the hotels had these big ballrooms, and they would do, Friday night, Saturday night, these 6 and 7 hour sets where thousands of people were just dancing. And that was like pop culture. If you know somebody now that's into ballroom dancing, that's sort of a little niche, thing. But back then it was something everybody.
The thing, yeah.
And some of the music is so amazing. And like if you think about in the 40s, so this is before micro groups. So the 33 1/3 and the 45 RPM records that we know today started in 1949 and really caught on in 50 and 51. But before that, it was 78s. And so they're the heavy shellac records. They shatter if you drop them. But that was what these guys were putting music out on on 78. So like here I've got, this is a compilation on Victor that's got Tommy Dorsey, Glenn Miller, Benny Goodman, and Artie Shaw all on one set. This is one I had looked at for a while. Now, as a collector, the album came with records in the sleeves. I actually keep the records separately because if you store them in there, sometimes you can snap it when you turn the page. But this is what an album was in the mid 40s. The cool thing, particularly about the Dorsey band, in the early 40s, Tommy Dorsey had Frank Sinatra as his vocalist, very young Frank Sinatra. So this is before his solo catalog on Columbia, and certainly before the Capitol and Reprise material that most people are familiar with. And so Frank Sinatra was singing lead, Bunny Bergen on trumpet, Buddy Rich on drums, Cy Oliver was the arranger, and the arranger was an incredibly important part of these bands because he would say, okay, the saxophones are going to do a solo, and then the trumpets, and then the trombones. And so the arranger was the one that would take sometimes very familiar tunes and make it unique to that band. And so some of the ghost bands that are still touring today, like you see Glenn Miller Band today, they're still using those charts that the arrangers did back in the day. So there's a cool box set that over 100 tracks that very young Sinatra did with Tommy Dorsey that have all been collected into this set. And then, of course, even though the original records were on 78, obviously there's a lot of vinyl releases. Some of the best of Glenn Miller, of Tommy Dorsey. One of my favorites is Duke Ellington. And so for me, learning about that period of time and reading about the 40s and how these bands worked really makes the music more enjoyable as well. And so if you've mostly enjoyed jazz as 3, 4, 5-piece combos, take a look at some of these big bands from the 40s. It's a very different sound, and it's a really great one, I think, as well. If you're going to start anywhere, I would say listen to Tommy Dorsey from the early 40s, or listen to anything from Duke Ellington. Really, really great stuff.
Right on.
Have either of you ever checked out any of that 40s stuff? I know for a lot of people, music started in the 50s, but if you go back a little bit further, there's some great stuff.
I mean, I want to say I've probably heard some Duke Ellington stuff, like the big names, but that's probably the extent of it. I've definitely never seeked it out, so that's something to do for
Rex,
sure.
have you seen the Ken Burns jazz series?
Yes, but it's been a while.
I'd recommend. I mean, if anyone wants to see the development of it, because exactly what you said.
Yeah,
unbelievable. When you say jazz, right? It's the equivalent of saying rock. There are so many
different things. Yeah.
I promise, depending on how far you dig and dive, you'll find your flavor.
Yeah.
I need to consume that for sure, because I'm still very much navigating that, and it's so vast, like you said, that it's hard to grasp it. There's so much to consume.
Well, I mean, and you can just start with Blue Note, or you can start with Impulse, or you can just do entire label studies.
Yeah.
I mean, when people talk about super groups, I always go, okay, you're talking about the Miles Davis quartet or quintet?
Right.
Which one? I mean, musician-wise, you're not going to go beyond that. But there's a lot there.
Yeah.
Well, you could spend an entire year easily just seeking out the things that Miles Davis was a part of. I mean, like and probably not emerge an expert even after a year.
No, yeah, that's a lifetime. That catalog is vast, to say the least.
To your point earlier about Genesis and the offshoot of that and all the recordings from that, you look at Miles Davis and all those that he played with and influenced, and the discography offshoots from that.
Yeah, it's like Bill Evans, for instance. I mean, you can deep dive into that catalog. Somebody I saw a poster one time that somebody had written in the very center in tiny font, Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young. And then they did that thing where they for everything that Crosby was part of, and then everything that Nash was part of. And still,
like the tree,
and from there, and it filled the poster with tiny print of all the different artists, like everybody that was in the Byrds, and then everything they did. Everybody was in the Hollies, everything they did. And so from that epicenter of Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young, out to pretty much everybody.
The influence,
sort of that Kevin Bacon game that the film buffs.
Sure.
But you can do the same thing in the jazz world. Start with Davis or start with Coltrane and go out from there. One of the interesting things about that 40s time period, though, much of America was very segregated, and so you had the big white bands like Dorsey and Harry James, and you had the big bands that were mostly African American, like the Duke Ellington and the Louis Armstrong band. And Dorsey just idolized some of those black artists, and they would play in different venues and at the same time. And Dorsey would try to wrap up his set so they could go see Louis, or go see Duke, because they, the musicians were mixing it up, even though the public wasn't integrated. So there was a lot of, stealing ideas from each other and mutual admiration going on. The other thing to think about, this is long before cell phones or emails or anything like that. And think about taking train trips all over the country with a 25-piece band. This is what Dorsey was so good at. He had to always be 3 steps ahead. If I lose a sax player in Topeka, who am I going to bring in? And these bands were very fluid, and they would steal members from each other all the time. But, he always had to have a head for business and a head for money, but also just that puzzle of keeping a band together, in a day without modern communication. Obviously admirable that he pulled it off.
Very cool. All right. Is it me now? I think it's me.
You're up.
Okay. So this is perfect segue, because we've been talking about deep dives. We've been talking about vast discographies and musicianship, and also shows. So Rex, you were there. We recently saw Dead and Company.
Yes.
This is Reckoning from the Grateful Dead. It's hard to say if it's my favorite Dead record, but it's certainly one of them. This was recorded. It's a live record recorded in 1980. And the reason why this record is a little unique in the Dead catalog is because it's primarily acoustic. Really stripped down, which I absolutely love, because then you get more of that kind of bluegrass country flair that the Dead was actually great at, but isn't necessarily known for as it pertains to their live shows. But this features Dire Wolf and, China Doll and Cassidy and Deep Ellum Blues and Ripple and tons of their kind of more well-known songs, as well as some deep cuts and covers and stuff. But I really appreciate this one. And I think if I was going to, and this is a thing about the Dead, a lot of people don't know where to start, because it's so vast and kind of overwhelming from a culture perspective. This is probably the record I would tell people to start with. If you're, this one, or obviously you go to like American Beauty or Working Man's Dead, obviously. But as far as a live record, which is where the Dead shines, this is one that I would probably point to the most to introduce people to the Dead. And it was fantastic seeing Dead and Company. Unfortunately, probably for the last time, because they're wrapping it up after the summer tour. But we touched on it off camera. Rex talking about just kind of the culture and the community and how unique it is. And that's what I love about it so much, is it's more than just the music. It's more than the album. It's like an entire thing. And there's very few artists that have developed such a unique experience that has lasted so long. And I think still will continue in some shape or form. But Reckoning by the Dead, check it out if you're not familiar. Fantastic record. Not a super rare album or whatever. You can pick it up. I don't know if there's a bunch of reissues or anything, but the original custom.
What label is that on, GI?
This is on Arista.
Okay.
Came out in '81, and so I think it was recorded in '80. If I did my research right, yes, it was recorded at the Warfield in San Francisco, and also at Radio City in New York. So it was a split performance that they pulled the best off. So yeah, if you're not a Deadhead, I would encourage you to give this one a shot. Maybe it'll open your eyes to it. So there you go.
Very cool. Yeah, one of the thoughts I had at that Dead show was John Mayer has done a very smart thing in, that whole subculture is going to look for a home. They found it with Dead and Company for a while, but it's not like they're going to go away. So, he can tap into that audience now. He's younger than the rest of the guys, obviously. So, for many years to come, if he decides to do some version of that, he's going to have that crowd show up. And it was out at Starplex for those of you who weren't there, and it was a bigger crowd as I've ever seen out there. There were probably 1,000 people in the parking lot that never even came into the show.
At least, yeah. The scene in the parking lot's a whole nother show in itself.
It's very much a carnival setting. You know, at some concerts you'll occasionally catch a whiff of marijuana. At this concert, you occasionally caught a whiff of fresh air.
If you were lucky.
And GI had his kids out there, so I'm sure they got some contact.
There were some there were some interesting moments there in regards to that in the lawn, because we were up in the lawn, and it was a hazy night in a good way. So, all right, Ezra, you up now?
Sir.
I've only got 3 left, so we'll see where we go here.
Horse the Band.
The Band. Okay, I've heard of this, but I don't think I've ever heard it.
This is an unbelievably good mathcore group that you would not pick up just from the cover. This was an RSD release. If you like 65 Days of Static, some elements of Tool, obviously some elements of Mars Volta, these guys are right there with them.
I had no idea. I always thought when I read the name or saw the name, I always thought it was like Americana or something.
I did too.
Okay, yeah, I'm not alone.
A friend in Florida knew that I was going to be one of those strange people wanting it at midnight, and he said, if there is a copy, please get me one.
Okay.
And I did, and then found out how good it was, and then another friend got this for me.
Full circle.
It's if you look at it, and this goes back to judging things by its cover, right? You're not going to look at this and at all imagine what is on these records.
And how old is that release? Is that something semi-recent, or is that an older record?
2005. Okay. But it was just released on vinyl on the last RSD.
Gotcha. Very cool. I'll have to check that out just to make sure I correct my very wrong perception of what that band was. I had no idea, even genre-wise, but I just always made the assumption.
Yes.
I think it's easy to do. That could be an interesting challenge, Rex. Play a record by a band that you thought was a totally different sounding band until you finally listened.
Oh yeah.
You have to put a little thought to it, but I'm sure there's a lot of them out there.
Right.
Okay, cool. Rex, is that you now or me?
I think it's me.
Okay.
All right. So I was high school class of 1991. So obviously Guns N' Roses was a big thing in the early 90s. The thing I wanted to share. Well, this thing is huge. It'll drop on your foot. But this is the 30th anniversary of the Use Your Illusion set. It is a 12 LP plus a hardback book plus a DVD set of. You see, there's the one cover. There's the two cover. Cool. Yeah, that's kind of cool. So the 12 LPs in this box set, it's the remastered 2 discs of Use Your Illusion 1. It's the remastered 2 discs of Use Your Illusion 2. And then there is a 4-disc set of Live in New York and a 4-disc set of Live in Las Vegas. That's the 12 sets, or the 12 discs. And then there's also a DVD, a Blu-ray of that Live in New York show. There's not a video of the Vegas show, just audio. But it is all fantastic. And the real highlight here, obviously the studio albums we already had, the real highlight is that Vegas show. It is fantastic. It was late in the tour, and they were very sort of, practiced. They were a well-oiled machine at that point, and they run through, all the hits you expect from the album: Civil War, November Rain, Knocking on Heaven's Door. The album plays like a greatest hits. There's just so much good stuff on it. But anyway, this was more than I normally would spend on a record, but I just had to have it. It's such an autobiographical part of my life from the early 90s, high school and early years of college. The book I mentioned, there's lots of pictures from the tour and from the studio making of the record. So really, really well done as box sets go. I know we've got some fans of box sets. There's some other, I'm not even going to go through it. There's a little packet in there that's got all kinds of like reproductions of backstage passes and
Yep.
Tour memorabilia and such.
I love that
and
stuff.
on the subject of GNR, I know we've got a few tape heads in the group. There's a Dead Media is doing reel-to-reel and 8-track releases of, custom releases of stuff. And they did also at the same time, it's 30th anniversary, they did a 2-tape set that is Use Your Illusion 1 and 2. And it is just like everything Dead Media does. It is phenomenal quality. The audio is great quality. The labeling is great. Little inserts with the artwork. Just as there are half a dozen outfits out there doing 8-track and cassette and reel-to-reel releases, but Dead Media is just top of the heap in terms of quality. The collector box that goes with the tape. So again,
so cool.
Both the studio albums even on red and blue tape shells. Very, very well done. So you can check out Dead Media. They've got a Facebook page, and you can order from them customs as well as things they've already released. And then the last thing on the subject of Illusion, Matt Sorum, drummer extraordinaire, wrote his account of that tour. And this book is great. I think you can still order an autographed copy, actually, if you look on the website. So it's called Double Talk and Jive, and he talks about his years with the Cult and Velvet Revolver, but probably half the book is about the Illusion tour. He had replaced Steven Adler as the drummer on these albums and on that tour. Still one of the highest grossing tours ever, 92, 93 when they toured Illusion. Obviously, you've got very, very strong personalities with Slash and
understatement of the year.
A lot of great stories of this copy is also, and I think you can still get it autographed by Matt. So that's a cool little addition to the collection. So anyway,
that's awesome.
That's my Use Your Illusion update.
So are you still in is GNR a show that you'll seek out to go when they come through?
Oh, absolutely. I've seen them probably 5 times and would definitely go again.
Very, very cool. Awesome. All right. Back to you, Ezra. What do you got next?
So I don't know where I got this. I don't know how I got it. I probably listened to this nonstop for about 2 weeks. It's a group called Random Hold.
Okay.
The guitarist of the group is David Rhodes, who's the guitarist for Peter Gabriel. Produced by Peter Hamill. It's a new wave, Gary Newman, Joy Division type set. It's unbelievably good. But as far as just a complete blindsided, you put this on and do not expect it, this would be the one that I would say of all of them, did not expect to like this, didn't know what it was. Literally all I knew was David Rhodes on it, knew his high standards, and really good. They have at least 3 recordings. But this is The View from Here, and it's a great one to start with.
Awesome. What label is that on, Ezra?
This is on Polydor.
Okay.
And what era, or like old, new? Like I'm always curious to try and wrap my head around when it.
I think it says 80, 82.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it's old.
Yeah.
But well recorded, and you could totally hear David Rhodes in it. I mean, but it's really surprising.
Very cool. Definitely have to check that out. Random Hold. Awesome. Okay. We've been on it an hour, so we're on pace. I got 3 left. Okay. I'm going to do a very obvious one, and the reason why I'm doing it is because I have been listening to it for just the last couple of days. I've only made it maybe 3-4 times through it, and many people have asked me my opinion on it since I initially showed it, and I don't even know if I really have an opinion yet, because after 3-4 spins of something, I don't know. It feels short-sighted. What was the Horses one? What was Horse the Band, right?
Horse the Band.
Horse the Band. So my obvious pick is one that is not very much to look at. This is the new Foo Fighters record. So I've been living with it, like I said, for a couple of days. I've only had a few spins. I'm liking it a little bit. gonna be honest. Like, it's nothing that I put on and it just dropped my jaw. But I could say that about a lot of Foo Fighters records, and some of them grow on you over time. I'm kind of expecting some of it to grow on me over time. I will say the second side of this record is the songs on there have grabbed me a little more than the first side. I think it's a tough record, obviously, because it's 14 months, I think, after Taylor's passing. And if you would have asked me when Taylor Hawkins passed if the band would be back on tour and have a new album 14 months after that, I would have been like, no way in hell. So more power to them for doing what they do and working their way through an awful tragedy. Foo Fighters are, to me, arena rock band, one of the premier arena rock bands in America, and they write albums that play into that. Ones that'll have big sing-along choruses, big hooks, loud guitars, crashing drums, and that's what this album is. This is I forget the name of it because it's nowhere. This is the white vinyl version.
We're going to call it the White Album.
No, it's not. It's but Here We Are. It's hard to remember that title because it's so common. So I'd be curious to hear how other people are feeling about the new Foo Fighters. Like I said, I'm still, the jury's out for me. I'm still listening. But I will say I would have to go back to Wasting Light, which is a few albums back as far as albums that have really, really grabbed me right away. So I'm curious if this one's going to slip onto that list, but I'm still listening to it, but it is definitely in high rotation over the past few days. So very top of mind.
The title is interesting because you said yourself, I didn't expect them to be back. And now the title is, But Here We Are. So
yeah,
it kind of,
I think it does. And there's obviously a ton of content on the album where it doesn't take much to read into it to try and imagine what Dave is going through and writing about. And so it'll get you as far as lyrically,
So that was actually going to be my first question about the record. Is there anything on there that's explicitly a Taylor Hawkins tribute?
Yeah. I mean, the last track is named Rest, and that's a big one.
So for those of us that haven't closely followed the story, did they replace him? Is there a new full member drummer? Or
yeah, so there was all these rumors swirling because once they announced the tour and the album, everyone's like, well, who's on drums? And then they did a live stream thing a couple weeks ago that was actually really cool because it was just them in the rehearsal room, and that's where they kind of announced their new drummer, which is Josh Freese. And he's an amazing studio drummer. He's played with everyone from Nine Inch Nails to A Perfect Circle. And he goes way back into, kind of late 80s kind of punk stuff as well. So not a big surprise, I don't think. And I don't know if it's like, oh, he's a member of the Foo Fighters, or it's like, oh, he's touring. Yeah. They're presenting it as he's the new drummer, but he's a very, very active studio musician. Session player for all kinds of genres, even of music. So it'll be interesting to see if he's with them for the long haul or it's just for this album cycle or what. But I'm sure live they're going to kill. He's a phenomenal drummer, and he fits the bill. So it's been interesting.
That's an interesting little subtopic, that question of for long established acts, if you have to bring in other musicians, do you make them members? And we've seen groups that'll do this thing where, these are session guys or these are touring musicians, but they're not members. I mean, think about like the Rolling Stones. Like ever since Ronnie Wood, they've had lots of other musicians, but they don't ever say you're part of the Rolling Stones. You're working with the Rolling Stones maybe, but you're not a member.
Differs for every group. And having been a musician in a band, I can tell you a lot of that is very touchy. And, it comes down to how they're going to pay these people, not that it really matters for someone like Josh Freese on the level of the Foo Fighters, because they're probably not worried too much about that. But session player, hired gun versus like full band member, there's a lot of politics in the inner workings of bands when things like that go down. So, and I'm sure it's different for every band, every scenario, they got to treat it differently. So I'm happy the band's active and doing what they do. And I think honestly, that's what they had to do. Like if you're those guys, it's the same thing. If you go watch interviews with Dave Grohl after Cobain passed, he's like, what else am I going to do? It's all I've ever done my whole life. It's like, I can't stop my life because of this. It's the same type of thing. So much respect to them for continuing on and again, doing what they do. So
great.
All right. Who's up? Rex, that you?
I'm next. Yeah, I was looking at the chat. Several people had some love for Ken Burns. I would say, yes, absolutely. In anything Ken Burns ever put his name on is going to be great. The country music, the jazz, the Civil War, the baseball, they're all just phenomenal. I mean, he is a generational documentary filmmaker without peer. Just phenomenal. So, yes, if Ken Burns has his name on it, it's going to be great. Okay, so my next pick is the Zombies. This will be a quick one. So, I've got a couple of examples here. So this is the Odyssey and Oracle album from the 60s with Time of the Season, probably the one Zombies record people know, phenomenal psychedelic era rock and roll. But the reason I bring it up is because they're touring now with a brand new album called Different Game. And a lot of times when you see, a classic act put out a new album, it's either just, okay. You like it because you like them, but it's not really groundbreaking. But this one is really, really good. It stands up well with the old material. So I know we've got people all over the country. If you have a chance to see Zombies on this tour, do it. They are phenomenal, still live. They've still got Rod Argent. They've still got Colin Blunstone. So you've got some depth of authenticity, but the music is really great, both the new stuff and what their current performances of the old stuff. We saw them at House of Blues a few months back, and there were, 5 or 6 of the Now Spinning people were there. So I know some of you saw that show, but very, very good.
Very cool.
Any thoughts on the either one of you?
I see their albums often, but you nailed it right off the bat. I really only know the big songs and the big covers, but it's another one of those vast discographies that I've never made the choice or just never had the right moment to really dive into. So something to add to the list for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Back to you, Ezra. Oh, there you go. Speaking of Gordon Lightfoot.
Yes.
So, obviously the hits off here, Carefree Highway, Sundown. But my favorite songs off here, 7 Island Suite, Circle of Steel. Bob Dylan said Gordon Lightfoot never wrote a bad song. And my mom was a huge Gordon Lightfoot fan. And so grew up just listening to, quote, that guy that told the stories when he was singing, was how I described him. Just cannot recommend him highly enough.
I think he's got to be one of the more underrated artists from that period. And unfortunately, it takes something like a death for a lot of people to come to that realization or voice it or take a shot and listen to it. But yeah, I kind of another one where I see the records a lot, and I do know that album and maybe 1 or 2 others and pieces of albums. But another vast discography where you've got it can be daunting. Like that's one of the things I think for me, an artist like that or some of these other discussions we've had, specific artists, it can be overwhelming and you don't know where to start. Like that was why I picked that Dead record. Out of all the Dead records, I was like, if I was going to recommend one to somebody like to start with, I'm always mindful of that because I know a lot of people, myself included, there's just so much music out there. It's hard to consume it all. It's hard to be an expert at all of it, hard to be knowledgeable about. And so a lot of times it's like, well, what's the good starting point? And so, I think that record for Gordon Lightfoot's probably the place.
Yeah, with Gordon, you really can't go wrong. I mean, any of the albums from the 70s, they're just solid start to finish. And he was a consummate songwriter, just amazing storyteller. Anyone who is a fan of, say, Chris Christopherson or Neil Young, the Gordon Lightfoot catalog is very much in that same vein, storytelling songs and very well written. And his voice was great as well. It was sad when he died, but he had been living on borrowed time for a while. I mean, I don't know all the details of his health problems, but he had heart problems and I think an organ transplant. Like he had several, like we thought he was going to die years ago. So I was very glad I got to see him live a couple of times. Fantastic show, such a deep catalog. But yes, absolutely, that first album is a great starting place. One of my favorite lines in all of pop music is his in that Carefree Highway song. He says, "Her name was Anne, and I'll be damned if I recall her face." So he's talking about his first love. So that's just again the way he wrote songs and hinting at a story and lets you fill in the visual. It's very cinematic. Speaking of documentaries, there's a great Gordon Lightfoot documentary that came out just a few years ago that follows him around and sort of tells the story from the beginning. And there's a lot of little drop-in interviews from famous Canadian artists. He was very Canadian, and so check that out. I don't remember the title, but it's a recent Gordon Lightfoot documentary.
I need to check that out because I don't know a ton of the history. Am I up? I think it's me.
Okay. My wife just fact checked me. It's called "If You Could Read My Mind" is the title of it. I think it's on.
Nice.
I like that Rex has an assistant dealing with his box sets. On-demand Wikipedia. Like I need one of those. Come on. Okay, my next pick. I've only got 2 left, but I think that's probably perfect timing-wise. Speaking of storytelling and speaking of artists that I've been binging because of live shows, this is the Nashville Sound by Jason Isbell. I've gone through a few really hard deep dives in recent years. None more than Jason Isbell over the last probably year, especially over the last 6 months when I had the opportunity to see him just recently. This album, he's got a lot of great records. This is a fantastic record. I don't think that really gets the credit because you hear about his big breakthrough album was called Southeastern. But this one features some songs like Last of My Kind and Tupelo and Hope the High Road, Cumberland Gap, Vampires. Just a fantastic record. And speaking of documentaries, if you haven't seen I think it's HBO Max documentary on Isbell, you just got to do it. It's not on this record. It was about the making of Reunions and about how he was recording that just pre-COVID and went through COVID. The Nashville Sound is fantastic. Reunions is great. His new album dropped Friday called Weather Vanes. I'm super excited about that. And so he's been top of mind for me for months and one of the best live shows I've seen in quite a while at Red Rocks, which was just phenomenal. So, and then saw him in Dallas as well. Can't say enough about as far as the storytelling aspect of what Jason does. Beautiful, beautiful work. And it's also cool that he has a lot of ties to the Dallas-Fort Worth area in regards to musicians he works with and has worked with, like the great Matt Pence and Will Johnson and just people that are all in his circle and just a really genuine dude. So I had to put Jason Isbell in this because if it's high rotation, then it had to be in there. So that's my second to last pick of the night.
So I have to check that out. I have not paid attention to Jason Isbell yet, but my good friend and very active now spinning member Timothy Arnold is always every time I get together with Timothy, he's like, "You got to check out Jason Isbell. You got to check out Jason Isbell.
You got to do it from a songwriting perspective."
On my to-do list. So that record you just held up, is that a good starting point?
It's a pretty good start. I think this one or Southeastern. Pretty good. Yeah, I mean Southeastern is the big breakthrough. It's the one that's got he's honest in every record, but Southeastern he's really honest in.
I would have said after Lyle Lovett's Joshua Judge's Ruth, the song She's Already Made Up Her Mind was the saddest song ever written. When Southeastern came out, Jason Isbell said, "Hold my beer."
Yeah.
Because there's stuff on there with his battle of alcohol. I mean, it's as transparent as you can get.
Yeah.
And still have any secrets left.
Yeah. And actually, Rex, the starting point, honestly, is that movie. Another Al Mays, who's in the group, I don't know if he's watching, a good buddy, he hadn't heard Jason either. And I told him, hey, watch the movie, and then that will light the fire, and you realize how dedicated he is to the craft of songwriting, regardless of his health, regardless of his marriage, regardless of whatever. He serves the song, and he is fully transparent in his storytelling. And so, the documentary is key. But Southeastern, which goes through, and someone just mentioned Drive-By Truckers. He started out in Drive-By Truckers, and eventually was fired because of his alcoholism. And so the movie goes through that whole roller coaster. Is really, really good. So, all right, who's up?
Oh, I guess it's me. All right, I got a quick one. So obviously much has been said about the Beatles and Paul McCartney's solo catalog, but what I have found, and this really hit home to me because we've been listening to the Beatles channel on XM radio recently. My wife's new car has XM, and so listen to the Beatles channel. And you know, they play Paul's stuff with the Beatles, and they play Paul's stuff with Wings, and then it just sort of disappears. And I thought a lot of people probably don't know Paul in the 80s and 90s, and there's some really great stuff there. And so I've got 3 picks I want to share with you all tonight. So the first one is Tug of War. This is from 1982, and it's interesting because this was the first album that Paul did after John Lennon had been murdered. And so there's an explicit tribute to John Lennon on here called Here Today, which is lovely, and Paul's done it in concert a few times over the years. But it also has the song Wanderlust, which is one of my very, very favorite Paul McCartney solo songs. So check out Tug of War from 1982. Really, really great post-Wings Paul McCartney album. The next pick I have for you is Flowers in the Dirt. This is a songwriting collaboration with Elvis Costello and Paul McCartney. Has some really, really great tracks on it. My Brave Face, the song called This One is one of my favorites. Just really lush and beautiful. A Rough Ride, Distractions, just solid album, start to finich. This is
Never
from
seen that.
So a few years.
Never seen that. Not on vinyl, I mean.
Yeah, so Flowers in the Dirt. I think this is a UK pressing. No, it's a US pressing. This is on Capitol, 1989. And then finally, what I think of as the last truly great Paul McCartney album. He's done some interesting things since then, but this is 1995. This is an original UK pressing of Flaming Pie. And again, just solid from start to finish. Here is an artist who is very comfortable with where he's at, nothing left to prove. It's storytelling. The song we were singing, Young Boy, Calico Skies, Flaming Pie, Little Willow, Really Love You, Beautiful Night, just on and on. Every song on here is great. So this is my plug for, if you love the Beatles, if you love the big hits from Wings in the 70s, check out some of the 80s and 90s stuff that Paul did, particularly Tug of War, Flowers in the Dirt, and Flaming Pie. I would say really, really solid albums.
I absolutely love Flaming Pie. I had never heard that record. There's a great reissue of it going back just a couple years that is like Ezra said, one of those records you can test your system on. It is a fantastic pressing, which is the one I have. I don't have an original, but the reissue is absolutely beautiful. So yeah, seek that. I love that record.
Yeah, this is an original English import from 95, and the price tag is still on it from Forever Young, $24.98. So
not bad.
I paid $24 for it all those years ago, and I think I got my money's worth.
Awesome. All right, Ezra, where you at?
For those of you who have neighbors that you might not like, I would recommend either of these reissues by Quicksand. Unbelievable recordings, unbelievable bands, very, very, very intense. If played at the correct volume, you'll be able to rearrange furniture and share with your neighbors. Either of these, absolutely essential.
Not a band that I've ever deep dived on. I've known the name. Early 90s, right?
Yeah.
As far as when they originated, I'm pretty sure.
Get a copy of Slip. This was Slip and Manic Compression.
Okay.
I know several bands in Dallas during that era that did shows with them.
Yeah.
And, just well recorded. The remaster is unbelievable.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but they're one of those bands like Failure, where it's like other musicians love that band.
Oh, yeah.
Like, they're like the band's band,
Yes.
That's how I've always at least perceived them, because I don't know the music real well, but that's the kind of bucket I always put them in with.
Yeah, it's one of those that you listen to them and you're like, wait, they sound like so-and-so that came out 3 years later. well, no, so-and-so sounds like them.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, it's really solid. And both, like I said, I got both of them. If you can only get one, start with Slip.
Slip. Okay, that's a good one. All right, this is my last pick of the night. Definitely deep dive in the deep dive category, and won't be any surprise if anyone follows my listening habits on Now Spinning. I don't think I've shown this one. Maybe I have though. This is Carrying On by Grant Green. I had to throw a jazz one in here. This is a beautiful album. This is a 1995 Blue Note reissue. Sounds absolutely fantastic. Originally came out early 60s. And this is, again, I don't know if I can say it's my favorite Grant Green, but it's up there right now and definitely in high rotation. It's a perfect blend of funkiness and just classic jazz, and unfortunately a hard one to find on vinyl. I looked and there's not a ton of pressings of it, and especially not of any recent reissues. I got this from a friend, but absolutely love it. I've been on a huge Grant Green kick. People ask me all the time, what do you listen to? And it's like, I'm kind of at that point where, I asked you what your percentage is earlier. Like, I'm probably 50% now when I go grab a record. I'm leaning towards jazz in a lot of ways. And I think that's because I don't stream jazz at all, hardly ever. I'll stream most everything else, but for some reason, and a lot of it's because some of it's not available, or it's stuff like this that's real. I just have an infatuation with listening to it on the turntable. So a lot of Grant Green spinning in my house. Absolutely love it. It's changed my world in a lot of ways over the last couple of years, and I'm glad I've gotten to that point where I can truly hear it and appreciate it. And he's definitely one of my faves, along with Miles and Brubeck and a lot of the other ones. Kenny Dorham, but Grant's on the top of that list. So check this one out if you don't have it. Pretty good entry point for Grant Green, as well as Green Street and Nigeria. There's a bunch of good ones. Got a vast catalog. So that's my last pick of the night, gentlemen.
All right, I guess I'm up. So I want to share the lost recordings.
Oh, I want to hear about these.
So I've only got 3 of them so far, 2 of the Dave Brubeck and 1 of the Duke Ellington. But the concept here is it's a label in Europe. I think they're in France. In fact, if you order them on their website, they actually ship from France. And they have scoured these concert halls in Europe, and they found tapes of shows that were, so it's all live stuff, that were recorded but never released. So these are all, recordings of shows that have sat on a tape for all these years. For the 3 I've got so far, the quality is just phenomenal. They sound amazing. The packaging is very lush. Some of them are hand numbered. So really, really well done. They're 2 LP sets in most cases. So the 3 that I've got so far, this is Dave Brubeck live in 1967 at Kurhaus, wherever that is, somewhere in Germany, I think. And so this is a Dave Brubeck shoot from 67. So, Time Out was already out at that point. So you're hearing some of that stuff. And then the other one is an earlier Brubeck. This is from 1955, 58, debut in the Netherlands and hand numbered, individually numbered. Again, just beautiful packaging, and the sound quality is great. And then finally, this Duke Ellington. This Duke Ellington album is a show from 69 and a show from 73 that they've combined into this one. And again, these were, things that had never been released before. 73, obviously, just a few years before Duke died. So this is one of his last shows. And they list all the musicians that were playing with him. So really great set. This is live at the Berlin Jazz Festival, both the 69 and the 73 show at that same festival. So anyway, check out the lost recordings. I've learned about these because they were doing a lot of Facebook ads that some of you may have seen. And I just said, well, let me give it a try. But yeah, it's a little bit spendy, as they say in the Midwest, but part of that you can mitigate if several of you want to order something together. You can combine the shipping, so that helps a little bit because it is coming from Europe. I don't think they have any North American distribution. As far as I know, you have to order it from their website. But anyway, very, very good recordings. And I pulled up the list of some of the others they have. So they've got Dizzy Gillespie, Ella Fitzgerald, Oscar Peterson, Stan Getz, Sarah Vaughan, Bill Evans, Astrid Gilberto, Art Blakely. So these are all artists that are, that were doing shows in Europe in the 50s and 60s, and that they found those original tapes. So pretty cool collection.
That's such a fantastic thing that there's someone who cares and is mining those years and bringing it to life on in such a premium way. Absolutely. It's so easy to half-ass stuff these days.
Right.
I'm glad that there are people out there who don't do it. That's great.
Right. And the thing about, my guess is, most of these recordings exist because the sound guy was rolling tape, not because it was approved. And the reason it was never released is because these artists were under contract with Columbia or with Victor or with Decca or whoever the record company was. And so if that tape had surfaced then, the record company would have owned it. So the sound guy just left it on the shelf. And then, all these years later, I don't know if it's public domain or if they have to negotiate the contract or whatever, but so they're finally able to release what couldn't have been released at the time. But so far on a small sample set of 3, I'm very, very impressed with the series. So check it out. And I'll be interested to know if any of the other listeners have gotten any of the other ones as well.
Yeah, someone was just asking, Jason, it's just Google the Lost Recordings and you'll find it.
Yeah, they have a website, and they will ship to the U.S.
Awesome. We're at 10:24 Central Time. Ezra, you got one more for us, and we'll wrap this up? Which? Okay, tell us about this.
This is that giant bandwagon known as African Psychedelic Garage Rock.
Well, of course.
Do they have garages in Africa?
Only these guys did.
Okay.
Only they had the one garage.
Yeah. Found this at Grimey's in Nashville. A lot of guys cite this. Flaming Lips, several different bands say this is one of the things they heard and listened to it repeatedly for inspiration.
And what year is this? Is this it looks like 70s, early 70s?
Yes.
I'm totally guessing, but.
Well, from the photo.
Yeah.
It's printed and pressed in Zombie. It doesn't even have a year on it.
That's all good.
But if you can find it, it's really interesting.
Mm.
You know what's funny about all of Ezra's picks? I know we got a couple of minutes left. There's that old saying about if you really want to be cool, you listen to music nobody's heard of. I saw a T-shirt on a kid at Six Flags one time that said, "I listen to bands that don't even exist yet." So Ezra's so much cooler than I am because he listens to things that no one's ever heard of. But
that's the eclectic nature of Now Spinning and why it's so great. And yes, hopefully this roundtable, whatever form that it ends up taking long term, will only perpetuate that idea and concept. I think that's the coolest thing about Now Spinning is that like you said at the beginning, Rex, our rules of don't be an asshole, obviously, and be respectful. Number one, but then secondarily, it's like just show off what you love and what you're listening to. And I think as long as we continue to root this group in that with conversations like this and with everyone's posts and following on the daily challenge, I think we're onto something here. So I know I really enjoyed this. I hope you guys did too.
Yes.
Well, obviously, we'll get some feedback from the group and see if this is a format that we should continue down this path. I think it's a very good starting point, and we'll see how it evolves moving forward. And we'll catch everybody next month. We'll do this.
For anyone that didn't catch the live stream, I think you're going to be able to post the recording of tonight. And
it'll be live. Yeah, it's already in the group. So once it ends, it's still there. So I'll pin it to the top immediately because there are a lot of people who obviously can't catch it live, which is totally fine. But yeah, totally on demand. It'll be available. It'll never be deleted. In fact, I need to hashtag it and stuff so we can find an easy way to find these episodes.
Sure.
By doing something like that. So I'll check on that. But yeah, thank you guys both for the time. It has been a pleasure. I will end the broadcast now, but have a great night, everybody. Thanks for listening in. Hopefully everyone enjoyed this, and we'll get some feedback from the crew and we'll keep it going next month.
Sounds great. Good night, everybody.
All right.
All right, thanks, y'all.